This chapter of RCD will explain the differing types of lighting that you will encounter on an aerodrome. At night, they are extremely well-lit places, and to the uninitiated may appear confusing. But each lighting system has a specific purpose, and once understood is easily interpreted. ICAO Annex 14 sets out the SARPs for aerodrome lighting systems, but it is a fact of life that in reality, aerodromes across the world have developed many variations on a theme of lighting. To successfully pass the ATPL exam on Air Law, you must have knowledge of aerodrome lighting systems, but not the details about spacing or grouping of lights, except for runway approach lighting systems. It may be the case that a non-aeronautical light exists in the vicinity of an aerodrome that could pose a danger to aircraft. If this is the case, it is to be extinguished or otherwise modified to eliminate the source of danger. Lights in the areas defined here are to be dealt with, and they should be removed or modified. For Code 4 instrument runways, within the areas before the threshold and beyond the end of the runway, extending for at least 4,500 metres and 750 metres either side of the centreline. For Code 2 or 3 instrument runways, within the area before the threshold and beyond the end of the runway for 3,000 metres and 750 metres either side of the centreline. And for Code 1 instrument runways and non-instrument runways, within the approach area. Lights that are elevated above the surface of runways, stopways or taxiways must be mounted on frangible stands. Their height shall be sufficiently low to preserve clearance for propellers and jet engine intakes, and they must be conspicuously identifiable. For aerodrome lights to be effective in conditions of poor visibility during daylight hours or at night, they must be of adequate intensity and meet the operational requirements of the aerodrome by being orientated in the right direction and illuminate the correct arc. The intensity of runway light shall be adjustable, but must ensure that lights are adequate for the minimum conditions of visibility and compatible with that of the approach lighting. The approach lights may be brighter, but not so intense that a pilot gains a false impression of the aerodrome visibility. Separate lighting intensity controls shall be provided so that the following systems can be operated at compatible intensities: the approach lighting system, the runway edge lights, the runway threshold lights, the runway end lights, the runway centerline lights, the runway touchdown zone lights, and the taxiway centerline lights. International airports and many smaller aerodromes will have alternate power supplies to cope with any power failures that might occur that would switch off aerodrome lighting. Where no such secondary power sources are available, emergency lights are to be provided for at least the primary runway. Where operationally necessary, an aerodrome beacon or identification beacon is to be provided at aerodromes that operate at night. The necessity of such beacons are determined by the conspicuity of the aerodrome and the availability of visual and non-visual aids that enable the pilot to locate the aerodrome. Aerodrome beacons flashing alternate white lights or white alternating with another colour, for example alternating with green at a land aerodrome, are to be provided at aerodromes intended for nighttime use if one or more of the following conditions exist. Aircraft using the aerodrome navigate predominantly by visual means, reduced area visibilities are commonplace, or it is difficult to identify the aerodrome from the air due to local conditions like lighting or terrain. The light from aerodrome or identification beacons shall show at all angles of azimuth and extend upwards to a height set by the authority that is sufficient to provide the required guidance to aircraft. It shall shine at no less than 2,000 candle power. An identification beacon shall be provided at an aerodrome which is intended for use at night, and cannot be easily identified from the air by other means. An identification beacon shall flash a set of identification letters in Morse code, and show flashing green at a land aerodrome, flashing yellow at a water aerodrome, and flashing red at some countries' military aerodromes.
Approach lighting systems are patterns of fixed lights of variable intensity that are designed to give the pilot guidance to the threshold of a runway in poor meteorological conditions or at night. They may include distance information, indications of aircraft attitude, or height above the approach plane. As you might expect, these systems vary in their complexity from simple centerline and crossbars to highly intricate layouts compatible with Cat 3 precision instrument approach systems. The determination of the visual criteria for landing can be met by the visual acquisition of the approach light system, and the design must cater for the most stringent decision heights and minimum descent heights. Approach lighting systems have developed more or less in line with the advancement in technology associated with instrument approach accuracy and demands. But all layouts, no matter what their design, must comply with the ICAO metric specification. Any ILS or MLS azimuth antenna that protrudes through the plane of the lights must be treated as an obstacle and marked and lit accordingly. The individual lights that make up an approach lighting system may be arranged as single light units or in the form of groupings of 3 or more lights arranged in a close bar. Centerline lights that conform to the more recent ICAO recommendations consist of 5 such lights. This configuration is called a barrette. In all cases, all lights shall lie as practicable as possible to the horizontal plane passing through the thresholds, provided that no other object other than the ILS-MLS azimuth antenna shall protrude through the approach plane of the lights within 60 meters of the centerline, and no light other than a light located within the central part of the crossbar or a centerline barrette shall be screened from the approaching aircraft. A simple approach light system consists of a row of lights on the extended centerline of the runway extending for a distance of not less than 420 meters from the threshold, with a row of lights forming a crossbar 18 meters or 30 meters in length at a distance of 300 meters from the threshold. The lights of the crossbar will be bisected at right angles by the centerline lights. The centerline lights shall be placed at intervals of 60 meters. But if improved guidance is required, they may be placed 30 meters apart. An example is shown here. The lights in this system are fixed and normally colored white. Each centerline light shall consist of either a single source light or a barrette of at least 3 meters in length. On a non-instrument runway, the light should show at all angles in azimuth for a pilot on base leg and final approach. The intensity of the lights should be adequate for all conditions of visibility and ambient light. For a non-precision approach runway, the light should show at all angles in azimuth to a pilot on base leg or final approach, which does not deviate by an abnormal amount from the path defined by the non-visual aid. The lights should provide guidance during both day and night in the most adverse conditions of visibility and ambient light. A precision approach Category 1 lighting system shall consist of a row of lights extending from the centerline of a runway over a distance of at least 900 meters from the threshold. It shall have a horizontal row of lights forming a crossbar 30 meters in length bisected by the centerline lights at a distance 300 meters from the runway threshold. The crossbar lights may be spaced up to 6 meters apart, but between 1 and 4 meters is usual. The lights forming the centerline shall be placed at longitudinal intervals of 30 meters, with the innermost light 30 meters from the threshold. The centerline of each crossbar light shall be fixed and show variable intensity white. Each centerline light shall either be a single source in the innermost 300 meters 2 lights in the central section, and 3 lights in the outer 300 metres, which will provide distance information. Barrette lights may be used and be of at least 4 metres in length. If the centerline lights consist of barrettes, they may be supplemented by a capacitor discharge light that will flash twice a second in sequence, beginning with the outermost light, progressing towards the threshold to the innermost light. They will be capable of independent operation. At those aerodromes where Cat 2 and Cat 3 approaches are conducted, more complex approach lighting systems are installed to enhance the ability of pilots to achieve the visual criteria needed to complete a landing. You will find many variations of this kind of lighting, but they're all based upon the Calvert 5-bar and centerline or ICAO barrette lighting systems. All systems are distance coded and give some elements of attitude information. The lights will extend over a distance of 900 metres from the end of the runway threshold, and possess 2 side rows of lights extending 270 metres from the threshold, and 2 crossbars, one at 150 metres and one at 300 metres from the threshold. The lights forming the centre line shall be placed at intervals of 30 metres from the threshold, and the crossbars shall be positioned at 300, 450, 600 and 750 metres from the threshold. The side row lights will be barrettes of comparable intensity to the surrounding white lights and show red light. They will be equal in length to the touchdown barrettes.
Precision Approach Path Indicator Lights, or PAPIs, are used to provide additional pilot guidance whilst they fly precision approaches. They give visual indication of the vertical position of the aircraft with respect to the glide path, and, if fitted to both sides of the runway, roll attitude as well. Abbreviated Precision Approach Indicator Lights are similar to PAPIs, but use 2 wing bar lights instead of 4. Full PAPI lights shall consist of a wing bar of 4 sharp transition multi-lamps equally spaced. The system shall be located on the left side of the runway unless it is physically impossible to do so. They are not designed to be used beyond 15 degrees either side of the runway centerline, and any additional restrictions on their use are found in the warning section of the AIP. The minimum eye height over threshold, MEHT, is derived from the visual aiming point on the runway that the PAPI glide path brings an aircraft to, that makes an allowance for the undercarriage height of the type of aeroplane that uses the aerodrome. It is notified in the AIP and is a reference value calculated with respect to the promulgated approach angle for each PAPI. It is defined as the lowest eye height over the runway threshold at which an on-slope indication will be seen. You must know this figure so that you can assess the usability of the particular PAPI system as set up for the runway you want to use. The following pictures show how PAPIs are interpreted by the pilot. Too high, slightly high, on the correct approach slope, slightly low, and too low. A similar system to the PAPIs and APAPIs is the T-VASI, or again in its abbreviated form, the AT-VASI. This system uses a set of wing bar lights coincident with the touchdown point of a precision approach, accompanied by 3 fly-down lights beyond the wing bar and 3 fly-up lights preceding it. For the AT-VASI, this configuration is present only on the left side of the runway in the approach direction. For the T-VASI system, the layout is additionally replicated on the right side of the runway. If a pilot is high on the approach, he will see a white wing bar with either 1, 2 or 3 white fly-down lights beyond it. The higher the pilot is, the greater number of lit fly-down lights. A slightly high approach will produce 5 whites in a foreshortened inverted T. A very high approach will produce 7 whites in the full inverted T. When on slope, only the wing bars will show, and they will be white. When dropping below the approach slope, an increasing number, up to 3 fly-up lights, will illuminate, extending the shaft of the T. Whilst the pilot's approach angle remains such that he will not strike an obstacle, the T will be white. However, continuing to drop below the slope, thereby compromising obstacle clearance, will cause an increasing number of the lights to turn red, starting with the wing bar and working down the shaft of the T. Whilst illuminating the T calls for action, the appearance of red lights necessitates an immediate response. That completes our discussion of approach slope indicator systems. Runway edge lights are provided for a runway intended for use at night, or for a precision approach runway intended for use by day or night. Runway edge lights shall be provided on a runway intended for takeoff, with operating minima set below an RVR of 800 metres by day. They shall be placed along the full length of a runway, and shall be in 2 parallel rows, equidistant from the centreline. They will be along the edge of the area declared to be usable as a runway, or outside the edges of the area, but not more than 3 metres away. They shall be uniformly spaced along the runway at intervals of not more than 60 metres for an instrument runway, or intervals of not more than 100 metres for a non-instrument runway. They shall show white, but if the threshold is displaced, then the displaced element shall be edged in red lights in the approach direction. On some runways, particularly those without centreline lights, the runway edge lights will turn yellow to warn pilots that the end of the runway is fast approaching. This yellow caution zone covers the final third, or 600 metres of the runway, whichever is the lesser distance. Runway edge lights shall show at all angles of azimuth necessary to provide the pilot with guidance whilst landing or taking off. All such lights shall show at angles of 15 degrees above the horizontal, with intensity adequate for the conditions of visibility and ambient light that the runway is designed for. Runway threshold lights shall be provided at a runway equipped with runway edge lighting, except on a non-instrument or non-precision approach runway, where the runway is displaced and wing bar lights are provided. When the threshold is at the extremity of the runway, threshold lights should be placed in a row at right angles to the runway axis, as near to the end as possible, and in any case not more than 3 metres outside the extremity. Threshold lights shall consist of at least 6 lights on non-instrument runways or non-precision approach runways. On a precision approach Cat 1 runway, consist of at least the number of lights that would be required if the lights were uniformly spaced at intervals of 3 metres between the runway edge lights. And, on precision approach Cat 2 and Cat 3 runways, consist of lights uniformly spaced between the runway edge lights at intervals of not more than 3 metres. Wing bar lights shall be provided on non-instrument or non-precision runways where the threshold is displaced and threshold lights are not provided. They indicate where the threshold starts. They shall be symmetrically disposed about the runway centreline at the threshold in 2 groups or wing bars. Each bar shall be at least 5 lights, extending at least 10 metres outwards from the line of the runway edge lights, with the innermost light of each bar in line with the runway edge lights. Runways that have edge lights shall have runway end lights. They are fixed, unidirectional red lights of an intensity that is suitable for the prevalent conditions. They will be positioned at right angles to the runway axis between the runway edge lights, not more than 3 metres outside the end, and consist of at least 6 equally spaced lights. On a precision approach Cat 3 runway, the lights shall not be spaced further apart than 6 metres. On precision approach Cat 2 or Cat 3 runways, white runway centerline lights shall be provided. They should also be installed on Cat 1 runways, particularly if the runway is used by aircraft with high landing speeds or the runway has a width greater than 50 metres. Should the RVR drop below 400 metres, then runway lights must be switched on. The light shall be positioned along the centerline of the runway, but if this is not possible, they may all be uniformly offset by up to 60 centimetres. The light shall run from the threshold to the runway end at the spacings shown here. 7.5 metres or 15 metres on a precision approach runway, Cat 3, 7.5 metres, 15 metres or 30 metres on a precision approach runway, Cat 2, or other runway for which lights are provided. Centerline guidance for takeoff from the beginning of a runway paved area to the displaced threshold should be provided by an approach lighting system if its characteristics and intensity settings afford the required guidance during takeoff and it does not dazzle the pilot, or runway centerline lights, or barrettes of at least 3 metres in length and spaced uniformly at 30-metre intervals of an intensity that does not dazzle a pilot taking off. Centerline lights, providing guidance to the threshold, must be capable of being extinguished, and similarly, utilised approach lighting must be capable of having its intensity reduced to enable landing aircraft to properly identify the displaced runway threshold. An example is shown here. Touchdown zone lights should be provided on precision approach Cat 2 and Cat 3 runways. They will extend from the threshold for a distance of 900 metres, except on runways less than 1800 metres in length. The system is shortened not to extend beyond the middle of the runway. The pattern of light shall be formed by paired barrettes symmetrically located about the centerline. Touchdown lights shall be fixed unidirectional lights showing white. An example is shown here. Rapid exit taxiway indicator lights provide pilots with distance to go information to the nearest rapid exit taxiway on a runway to enhance situational awareness in low visibility conditions and enable pilots to apply braking action for more efficient rollout and runway exit speed. 6 yellow lights adjacent to the runway centerline, configured as shown here, are spaced 100 metres apart, the single light being 100 metres from the rapid exit taxiway. Stopway lights shall be provided for the full length of the stopway and be in 2 parallel rows that are equidistant from the centerline and coincident with the rows of the runway edge lights. They will also be provided across the end of the runway. The lights will be fixed unidirectional lights showing red in the direction of the runway. You can see an example of the layout here.
At those aerodromes equipped for low visibility operations, taxiways are equipped with green centerline lighting. Otherwise, blue edge lighting is provided. Where green centerlines exist, blue edge lights may supplement them, providing additional guidance on sections of taxiway that are difficult to negotiate. Green centerline lights may be provided on the runway just prior to an exit taxiway in order to give lead-off guidance. Aprons and holding areas are usually delineated by blue lights. Taxiway lighting is designed to provide pilots with information and guidance during the taxi to and from the runway. It will consist of centerline lights, edge lights, guard lights, and stop lights at holding points. Taxiway edge lights are intended for use at night and are to be of variable intensity, show blue, and show all around and up to 30 degrees above the horizontal such that guidance is provided to a pilot taxiing in either direction. At intersections or bends, the lights may be shielded to prevent confusion. If effective flood lighting over a large area is provided, edge lighting may be dispensed with. As we have said, taxiway centerline lights are green and are designed for use in runway visual range conditions less than 350 metres or aircraft operations at night, and are to provide continuous guidance from the runway centerline to a point on the apron where the aircraft start parking manoeuvres. Runway guard lights are pairs of alternately flashing yellow lights. A pair will be placed either side of the taxiway to warn of the close proximity of the runway. If the taxiway is wider than normal, the guard lights may stretch across the full width of the taxiway. These lights are sometimes called wigwags. Lighted stop bars and lead-on lights are provided at those aerodromes authorised for low visibility operations. A stop bar consists of a row of lights spaced equally across the taxiway, normally at right angles to the centerline, and showing red towards the approaching aircraft when lit. Stop bars are normally installed in association with green lead-in lights, which form part of the taxiway centerline lighting beyond the stop bar. They are linked so that when the stop bar is on, the green centerline beyond the stop bar is off, and vice versa. They are, in a way, traffic lights, and the pilots must not cross illuminated stop bar lights. At aerodromes where Cat 2 and Cat 3 operations take place, or where ground movement requirements are complex, a surface movement guidance and control system may be installed to regulate ground traffic. The system selectively switches on and off the taxiway centerline lights so that individual sections or routes ending in stop bars are illuminated in order to show the way ahead. At some aerodromes, where multiple intersecting taxiways are not provided with a selective route guidance system, taxiway intersection lights are installed. These consist of a row of at least 3 steady yellow lights disposed symmetrically about the taxiway centerline. Pilots should give way to crossing traffic unless instructed otherwise by ATC. On infrequently used taxiways, blue reflective edge markers and green centerline studs may be positioned instead of lighting systems. Although it's unlikely, you might come across unpaved taxiways, but these may be illuminated with blue portable taxiway edge markers or have the area floodlit. Portable white lights may be used to mark the boundary of a manoeuvring area on a grass aerodrome, for example. A road holding position light shall be provided at each vehicle road holding position serving a runway when it is intended that the runway shall be used in runway visual range conditions of less than 350 metres, and vehicles still require access across the runway. This light shall either be a conventional traffic light, red for stop and green for go, or a flashing red light indicating do not pass. The light shall be controlled by ATC. The light shall be adjacent to the hold position markings 1.5 metres from the roadside edge.
The signs located on an aerodrome, when used in conjunction with an aerodrome chart, are intended to simplify surface movement guidance and control procedures, particularly in conditions of low visibility. There are mandatory signs and information signs. All aerodrome signs shall be frangible, and those near to runways shall not provide a hazard. They will be rectangular and retroreflective or illuminated. Mandatory signs consist of runway holding position signs, including intermediate holding position signs, road holding position signs, and no entry signs. They display white characters on a red background, as shown here. Runway holding position and intermediate holding position signs are located alongside the appropriate surface markings described later on. They identify the holding position and indicate the direction in which the holding instruction applies. Pilots must not pass mandatory signs unless instructed by ATC. Should more than one taxiway serve a runway, or more than one runway holding position sign be on a taxiway, then a location sign is attached to the runway taxi holding position sign in order to assist in identifying the position. At aerodromes with Category 1, 2 or 3 approaches, runway holding position signs will be located on both sides of the taxiway. But on smaller aerodromes, supporting visual operation only, the sign is placed on one side only, normally the left-hand side of the taxiway. If no ATC unit is present, the sign constitutes the position where aircraft and vehicles concede right-of-way to aircraft taking off or landing. Shown here is a resume of the differing kinds of mandatory signage that you are likely to see when you start your professional flying career. At aerodromes equipped for Cat 2 and Cat 3 ILS approaches, runway taxi holding position signs are annotated Cat 2, Cat 3, or Cat 2-3 as appropriate. However, because of the need to provide greater protection to Cat 2 and 3 ILS systems, the runway holding position signs associated with them are set back further from the runway than those at Cat 1 runways. Where part of an aerodrome is restricted to one-way traffic or is withdrawn from use, no entry signs, as shown here, are located on both sides of the entrance mouth to the area concerned, showing in the direction from which entry is prohibited. The signs may be supplemented by the painted marking No Entry across the width of the taxiway. Again, because the instruction is mandatory, the inscription will be in white on a red background. Information signs consist of location, direction, and destination signs. They are only provided where there is an operational need to provide additional guidance to pilots manoeuvring on the ground, and should be used in conjunction with an up-to-date aerodrome chart. Location signs are used to identify taxiways and, where necessary, runways at complicated intersections. Taxiways are normally designated with a single letter, like A for Alpha. The letters O, I and X are not used. On very large aerodromes with lots of taxiways, double-letter combinations can be used. A specific position on a taxiway will have the taxiway designator and an identifying number. Runway location signs use the first two numbers of the magnetic heading of the runway. Direction and destination signs consist of a route designation label and an arrow pointing in the appropriate direction. The letters will be displayed in black characters on a yellow background. They are normally accompanied by a location sign and positioned on the left-hand side of the taxiway before an intersection. A marker is an object that is displayed above ground level in order to indicate an obstacle or delineate a boundary. Markers are used when lights are not provided or do not adequately serve the required purpose. Typically, they indicate the extremities of taxiways in snowy conditions or bad ground on grass or other unpaved aerodromes. Markers will be low enough to not pose a hazard to passing aircraft propellers or jet engines. Markers will be established when the extent of an unpaved runway is not clearly indicated by the appearance of its surface compared to that of its surroundings. Flat markers at least 1 metre by 3 metres, or conical markers not exceeding 50 centimetres high, should be placed to delineate the runway edge. Taxiway edge markers will be provided on taxiways where the code number is 1 or 2, and there are no taxiway centre lights. They should be reflective blue and frangible. Taxiway centerline markers should be provided on code 1 or 2 taxiways if there are no taxiway edge lights or markers provided. All taxiway centerline markers will be reflective green and be capable of being run over by aircraft wheels, and not being damaged or damage the aeroplane wheels. Taxiway edge markers will be placed on taxiways where the extent of an unpaved taxiway is not obvious. They will be incorporated with taxiway edge lights if installed, or be conically shaped markers delineating the boundary if not. Boundary markers shall be provided at an aerodrome where the landing area has no runway. Boundary markers shall be spaced along the boundary of the landing area at intervals of not more than 200 metres. They will take the form of the markers shown here. Alternatively, they can be of the conical type, in which case the maximum spacing between them will be 90 metres. It is obvious that the presence of any obstacles within the vicinity of or on an aerodrome is not desirable and might limit an aerodrome's operational capability. The marking and/or lighting of any such obstacle is intended to reduce any hazards posed by it. Aerodrome operators must consult with the owners of any structures deemed to be obstacles, and are responsible, if the obstacle is in the movement area, for their lighting and marking, irrespective of ownership. When we talked about the establishment of instrument approach and departure procedures, you will recall that obstacles were identified to allow the creation of operating minima and obstacle clearance height or altitude. Their identification might result in limitations being placed upon takeoff and landing distances, and impact the range of meteorological conditions in which aircraft operations can be undertaken safely. For these reasons, certain areas of local airspace must be regarded as integral parts of the aerodrome environment. Thus, an instrument approach runway will have an established obstacle-free surface as a basis upon which the instrument procedure is designed and the minima established. For a precision approach runway, the maintenance of the obstacle-free surface is particularly critical to protect the minimum descent altitude established for the safety of aircraft movements. The method of assessing the importance of obstacles is obtained by establishing an Obstacle Identification Surface, OIS. An obstacle would be considered significant if it protruded through the OIS. Clearly, a degree of safety margin is applied to this situation. A takeoff OIS will be a smooth plane with the base increasing in height as distance from the departure end of the runway, DER, increases. But for a non-precision approach OIS, varying profiles will apply from the final approach fix to the threshold. So the OIS considers takeoff and approach profiles and the land surrounding the aerodrome and its environment, above which consideration needs to be given to the control of new and the removal or marking of existing obstacles. This will help ensure the safe visual manoeuvring of aircraft in the vicinity of the aerodrome. Any objects protruding through the closer OIS zones are deemed to be aerodrome obstacles. Around major international airports, these zones may extend to 15 kilometres. Obstacles of significant height, usually 150 metres or more further away from the aerodrome, are considered to be en route obstacles. The marking and/or lighting of an obstacle is done to reduce the hazard to aircraft by indicating the presence of that obstacle to the pilot. Any fixed obstacle within 3,000 metres of the inner edge of the OIS, and those adjacent to the takeoff climb surface, should be marked. And if the aerodrome is used at night, then they should also be illuminated. If any obstacle is illuminated by high-intensity lights during the day, it need not be marked as well. Should an obstacle be masked by another, then it need not be marked or lit. Lighthouses need not be lit if they are already sufficiently lighted and do not present a hazard to aircraft. With the exception of aircraft, all vehicles and mobile objects on a movement area of an aerodrome are considered obstacles, and shall be marked and lit if the aerodrome is used at night. Aircraft servicing equipment and vehicles restricted to aerodrome aprons are exempt. There are many instances of overhead wires and cables crossing rivers and valleys. When it is determined that such cables and towers pose a hazard to aircraft, then they must be marked and lit. Cables should display contrasting spherical discs of red and white or orange and white. Once identified as an obstacle needing marking because it is a hazard, it should be made conspicuous by placing a coloured marker or flag upon it. It should be coloured to show a checkered or striped pattern. Checkered patterns should be of rectangles not less than 1.5 metres or more than 3 metres square, the corners being the darkest. Stripes may also be used. The colours of the pattern should contrast each other and the background against which they will be seen. Conventionally, orange and white or red and white checkers are used. Vehicles and mobile objects should be marked by a single conspicuous colour, preferably red or green for emergency vehicles, or yellow for service vehicles. Markers on fixed objects should be conspicuous and be recognisable from at least 1,000 metres away when viewed from the air, and 300 metres away when seen from the ground. Their presence must not increase the hazard they mark. When marking flags are used, they shall be placed around the top of any obstacle. They will be used to mark fixed objects and be orange or red in colour, or a combination of two triangular sections, one orange, one white, or red and white. When using flags to mark mobile objects, they will be of a checkered pattern of red and white or orange and white. Low, medium or high intensity lights are used to illuminate the presence of objects that may pose an aeronautical hazard. High intensity obstacle lights are intended for use during the day as well as at night. Low intensity obstacle lights shall show steady red, be of sufficient contrast to their backgrounds to ensure conspicuity, and are generally found mounted on fixed obstacles or those with limited mobility, such as air bridges. Where their use is considered to be inadequate, then medium or high intensity lighting should be considered. Medium intensity obstacle lights shall show flashing red at a rate of 20 to 60 per minute, except when they are used in conjunction with high intensity lights, when they will flash white. When used in multiples, these lights shall flash in unison. Medium intensity lights can also be used either alone or in conjunction with low intensity lights to illuminate an object that is an extensive one, or has a height which is above the level of the surrounding ground and is greater than 45 metres high. High-intensity obstacle lights shall simultaneously flash white at a rate of 40 to 60 flashes per minute. They are used to indicate the presence of objects that have a height in excess of 150 metres above the surrounding ground, and where it is deemed by aeronautical study that recognition of the obstacle by day is essential. They will be used to indicate the presence of wires and cables, or the towers supporting cables, that in themselves cannot be marked. Obstacle lights shall, where possible, be located as close to the top of any object as they can be, and be placed to delineate the points and edges of the highest element of it. If placed on a chimney, light should not become contaminated by any emissions. If a high-intensity light cannot be placed on the top of an obstacle, then a medium-intensity light should be placed as high as practicable up it. Guide towers of antenna, for example. In the case of a significantly large obstacle, or extensive groups of obstacles, then top lights are to be positioned so that the general definition of the obstacle or its area is defined in relation to the highest element of it. Especially tall objects may have additional lights positioned on them. They will be equally spaced up the obstacle and visible from all angles in azimuth. Objects located beyond 15 kilometres from the aerodrome are normally only considered to be obstacles to aircraft if they exceed 150 metres in height. During the day, they are usually lit by high-intensity flashing white lights. If, however, such a display at night could dazzle the pilot, medium-intensity red lights may be substituted, either flashing or fixed. In some arrangements, the fixed red lights illuminate in a sequence. That is, the red in the middle of the obstruction lights first, to be replaced by the red at the top, which in turn is replaced by the red at the foot of the obstruction. The sequence repeats throughout the night hours. Whilst we are talking about aerodrome obstacles, you should remember that parked aircraft can be obstacles too, and should be lit either by the aircraft navigation lights or by ancillary lighting that determines the extremities of the aeroplane. Aerodrome operators are responsible for ensuring that vehicles on the movement area are lit or marked irrespective of ownership. Whenever a vehicle is on the movement area, it must display low-intensity flashing yellow lights. Aerodrome operators are responsible for ensuring that vehicles on the movement area are lit or marked irrespective of ownership. Whenever a vehicle is on the movement area, it must display low-intensity flashing yellow lights. Emergency vehicles will show blue flashing lights when responding to an emergency, otherwise show yellow vehicle lights. Other than responding emergency vehicles or vehicles towing aircraft, vehicles will give way to aircraft. This diagram summarizes the criteria by which obstacle lights are positioned. A closed marking shall be displayed on a runway or taxiway, or portion thereof, denoting that it is permanently closed to use by all aircraft. Runway closed marking shall only consist of a white cross at either end of the runway, and at intervals of no more than 300 metres along its length. A yellow cross will identify a closed taxiway. No functioning lighting will be installed on a closed runway or taxiway, other than red lights across the entrance to the unusable surface to indicate its unavailability. Some areas of taxiways, manoeuvring areas, holding bays and aprons may not have the same load-bearing qualities as others. To enable pilots to distinguish these areas and prevent damage to their aircraft, the boundary between such an area and the load-bearing area shall be marked by a taxi side stripe mark, as shown here. When the surface before a threshold is paved and exceeds 60 metres in length and is not suitable for normal use by aircraft, the entire length before the threshold should be marked with a chevron marking that should point in the direction of the runway. Aerodrome emergency planning is the process of preparing an aerodrome to cope with an emergency occurring at or in the immediate vicinity of it. Implementation of the plan should result in minimizing the effects of any incident, save lives, and maintain aircraft operations. It must coordinate the actions of all the response services of the aerodrome and the surrounding community. The Rescue and Firefighting Service is established to save lives in the event of an accident, on or in the immediate vicinity of the aerodrome. Effective response to a survivable aircraft accident within the aerodrome bounds offers the best opportunity to save life. The keys to an effective rescue service are training, equipment effectiveness, and response time. The Airport Fire and Rescue Service is not established to respond to fight building or installation fires. The level of fire and rescue protection provided at an aerodrome shall be appropriate to the aerodrome operating category and compliant with the fire and rescue categories shown in the table here. The aerodrome category depends on the overall length and maximum fuselage width of the aircraft that will normally use the aerodrome. Look up the overall length of the longest aircraft expected. If the maximum fuselage width is not exceeded, then you have the category. If, however, the maximum fuselage width is exceeded, then add 1 to the category, such that a Category 2 aerodrome would become Category 3. The operational objective of the rescue and firefighting services should be to achieve response times of 2 minutes, never exceeding 3 minutes, to the end of each runway or movement area in optimum conditions of visibility and surface conditions. The target time standard is 2 minutes from receipt of call until the first vehicle on scene is discharging its fire suppressant foam at 50% of the required rate. Emergency access roads should be provided on an aerodrome where terrain conditions permit, so that minimum response times can be achieved. Access to within 1,000 metres of each threshold should be achievable. All emergency response vehicles should normally be housed in the fire stations within the aerodrome, but satellite stations that enable effective response may also be established. Access to runways must always be direct and clear, requiring a minimum number of turns. The table shown here recommends the number of rescue and firefighting vehicles required at each category of aerodrome. Emergency vehicles responding to an emergency shall be given priority over all other surface movement traffic. When warranted by the large volume of aerodrome ground traffic, an appropriate RT-equipped apron management service, which may not necessarily be the local air traffic service unit, will be provided to regulate movement of ground traffic with the objective of preventing collisions between aircraft and between aircraft and obstacles, regulate entry of aircraft into and coordinate exit of aircraft from aprons, ensure safe and expeditious movement of vehicles, visually monitor aircraft stands, regulate all other activities. The ground servicing of aircraft must be undertaken safely and expeditiously using appropriate equipment. Initial firefighting equipment and personnel trained to use it must be in place around aircraft being refueled and serviced. There must also be a means of quickly summoning the services of the Aerodrome Fire and Rescue Service. Environmental contamination incidents must also be controlled. When aircraft are being refueled whilst passengers are embarking or disembarking, ground equipment shall be positioned to allow for the use of sufficient number of exits for expeditious evacuation and a ready escape route from each of the aircraft exits to be used in the event of an emergency. Birds represent a continuing danger to the safe operation of aircraft, and pilots are to report all instances of bird strikes to the appropriate authority. It is the authority that must instigate measures to reduce the dangers posed to aircraft from birds by implementing procedures and plans to control the activity of birds within the confines of aerodromes. ICAO are particularly interested in bird strikes, migration patterns, etc. There is a bird management scheme called, appropriately, IBIS, in force.
The word facilitation means to make easy or less difficult. And in the context of international aviation, ICAO establishes policies and procedures for contracting states to follow that expedite the whole business of international air transportation. In this lesson, we will look at some of those regulations and some terms that are commonly used when talking about the issue of facilitation. The standards and recommended practices concerning facilitation, you may recall, are contained in Annex 9 of the ICAO Convention and are the outcome of Article 37. You will recall that this provided for the ICAO to adopt international standards and recommended practices to deal with customs and immigration procedures and such other matters that concern the safety, regularity, and efficiency of air navigation. Specifically, Article 22 of the Convention further strengthened the states' responsibilities in this respect by obliging states to adopt all practical measures to facilitate and expedite navigation between territories of contracting states and to prevent unnecessary delays to aircraft, crews, passengers, and cargo, especially in the administration of the laws relating to immigration, quarantine, customs and clearance. Article 23 of the Convention continued the process by requiring contracting states to establish customs and immigration procedures affecting international air navigation in accordance with the practices recommended by the Convention. At this point, an understanding of some of the definitions would be useful. Shown next are phrases that need to be understood when dealing with international air navigation facilitation. The general principle at stake regarding the entry and departure procedures at international airports are based upon the concept that governmental controls applied to air travel should be no more or less stringent than those for any other form of transportation. They should reflect the advantages of speed inherent in air travel, and states must ensure that aircraft, cargo, and passengers are not encumbered by security or crime prevention processes. The only documents that are needed by the public authorities for the entry and departure of aircraft are explained here, but it should be remembered that the migration towards an entirely electronic means of documentation exchange is upon us, and the need to carry paper reduces continuously. The International Health Regulations of the World Health Organization, WHO, state that ICAO contracting states should not interrupt air transport services for health reasons, but if, to stop a global pandemic, cessation of air traffic is considered, contracting states should first consult the World Health Organization and local authorities before any decision to suspend air travel is made. Pilots in command make a declaration of health of their crew, passengers and cargo in the General Declaration form. The General Declaration is an internationally recognized form which contains all the details of the aircraft, the flight number, date, place of departure and destination, and it is normally asked for by contracting states upon arrival. It contains details of all the flight crew and passengers and the routing of the aircraft, along with all the health declarations, and is signed by the pilot in command or by an authorized agent. It is the eventual aim of the declaration to eliminate any reference to passengers. Contracting states will not require the presentation of the General Declaration when such information is obtainable from other sources. The form is laid out in Appendix 1 to Annex 9 of the ICAO Convention. In addition to the General Declaration, passengers and cargo manifests are internationally recognized documents that detail the names of passengers and the nature of the cargo embarked upon the airplane. Contracting states may eliminate the need for passenger and cargo manifests if they accept alternative electronic forms of information dissemination or attestations from authorized agents. Operators carrying mail shall present for inspection the Form AV7 as prescribed by the Acts in Force of the Universal Postal Union for customs clearance. Contracting states shall not require the presentation of a list of the number of pieces of accompanied baggage, but operators will provide the authorities with available information when it has not been provided to the customs authority by a passenger. An oral declaration is an acceptable situation concerning the content of crew and passenger baggage. Random checks are acceptable. There is no requirement for a declaration for stores of food, oil, fuel, or expendables remaining on board, although some states still request such details. Annex 9 states that a maximum of 3 copies of each document shall be made available upon request. For examination purposes, the following numbers should be used: 2 copies of the General Declaration, 2 copies of the Cargo Manifest, and 2 copies of a simple stores list. On arrival, contracting states will not require the pilot in command to deliver more than 3 copies of the General Declaration, 3 copies of the Cargo Manifest including unaccompanied baggage, and 2 copies of a simple stores list. Documents may be printed, typewritten, or handwritten in legible form. You will recall that the regulations and procedures applied to persons travelling by air are not to subject those people to any less favourable circumstances than any other traveller. Furthermore, Annex 9 to the Convention provides that no contracting state will require any additional documents from the visitor who are from contracting states to be produced other than those listed in that annex. Contracting states shall also ensure that when inspection of crew members and their baggage is required on arrival or departure, such inspections will be carried out as expeditiously as possible. Contracting states will provide crew members, without delay or monetary charge, crew member certificates, valid for the term of the individual's employment. The crew member certificate may act as a form of identity and allow that crew member access to the state as if a passport. Each contracting state shall extend privileges of temporary admission to any flight crew and cabin attendants operated for remuneration or hire, but not engaged in scheduled international air services. The privileges are subject to the requirements that such people must depart on the aircraft on its first flight out of the territory. Similarly, contracting states should make provision to allow the temporary entry into their country of technical personnel of foreign airlines operating to, through, or from their country who are urgently needed to repair an aeroplane and allow it to continue on its journey. Visitors to contracting states are not required to have any documents other than a valid passport and, if required, a visa to enter the country. Some states require additional information, and they glean this from the embarkation or disembarkation cards. Authorities should not collect identity documents from passengers or crew. It is the case that contracting states may require all visitors to produce certificates of inoculation or be subject to a medical examination if they arrive from an area of known infection. Plague, cholera, yellow fever are examples of the serious diseases that might trigger such actions. When non-nationals arrive in a contracting state and do not possess the correct documentation, they will be returned to their point of departure at the carrier's expense. The carrier may, of course, seek recompense from the inadmissible person. States' own citizens will not be required to have entry or exit visas after visits abroad by air. Should a carrier be required by the authority to transport deportees, then they must be informed of the fact. The deporting state will issue a notice to all other states en route and the state of destination the following information: the identity of the deportee, the reason for the subject's deportation, the names of any escorts, and a risk assessment. This completes the lesson on facilitation. Along with deportees, the repatriation of inadmissible persons and the transport of those persons who are to face judicial proceedings are all potentially risky undertakings, and therefore should be known to the pilot in command. This completes the lessons on facilitation.
The relevant ICAO documents pertaining to search and rescue are Article 25 of the Chicago Convention, which obliges all contracting states to provide assistance to aircraft in distress, Annex 12 to the Convention, which covers search and rescue procedures, and the ICAO Search and Rescue Manual, Doc 7333. You will remember that the alerting service, described in the Air Traffic Services element of this disc, is only one element of the search and rescue organisation, and serves to alert other agencies of the need to prepare and provide the necessary assistance. The ability of a state to provide a comprehensive search and rescue service depends on many factors, not least of which is funding. Many nations face greatly differing practical issues. For instance, Tibet and Bermuda face very different challenges when planning their own search and rescue services. In general, one having to provide a mountain rescue service and the other a maritime rescue service. Contracting states are required to delineate the areas in which they will provide a search and rescue service. Ideally, these boundaries would coincide with the flight information region boundary of the state and should not overlap. Where contracting states find themselves unable to provide search and rescue support for any reason, other states may provide it for them. In the case of Cyprus, the United Kingdom Royal Air Force provides this service. Those areas of the globe covered by the high seas or land masses of undetermined sovereignty shall have a search and rescue service established to cover them, as agreed by the local regional air navigation agreements. Having accepted responsibility to provide a search and rescue service for such an area, the contracting state shall thereafter arrange for that service to be provided and maintained in full. The ICAO Convention dedicates an entire annex to search and rescue, Annex 12, and as such, you will be required to know the definitions listed here that pertain to SAR operations. You will already recognize some of them. The uncertainty phase is a situation wherein uncertainty exists as to the safety of an aircraft and its occupants. The alert phase is a situation wherein apprehension exists as to the safety of an aircraft and its occupants. The distress phase is a situation where there is a reasonable certainty that an aircraft and its occupants are threatened by grave and imminent danger or require immediate assistance. The emergency phase is a generic term meaning, as the case may be, the uncertainty phase, the alert phase, or the distress phase. An operator is a person, organization, or enterprise engaged in or offering to engage in an aircraft operation. The pilot in command is the pilot responsible for the operation and safety of the aircraft during flight. A radio direction finding station is intended to determine only the direction of another transmitting station. The Rescue Coordination Center, RCC, is responsible for promoting efficient organization of search and rescue services and for coordinating the conduct of search and rescue operations within a search and rescue region. A rescue unit is a group of trained and equipped personnel who will expeditiously undertake rescue operations. The state of registry is the state on whose register an aircraft is entered. To remind you, here are all the definitions again. In addition to the definitions, you will also be required to be familiar with the following abbreviations, all of which relate to SAR operations. SRG, short range, relating to aircraft with a search radius of 150 nautical miles or more and having an endurance of half an hour remaining. MRG, medium range, relating to aircraft with a search radius of 400 nautical miles or more and having an endurance of 2.5 hours remaining. LR, long range, relating to aircraft with a search radius of 750 nautical miles or more and having an endurance of 2.5 hours remaining. VLR, very long range, relating to aircraft with a search radius of 1,000 nautical miles or more and having an endurance of 2.5 hours remaining. ELR, extra long range, relating to aircraft with a search radius of 1,500 nautical miles or more and having an endurance of 2.5 hours remaining. HELM, a medium helicopter, a helicopter with, in normal circumstances, a radius of action of 100 to 200 nautical miles and a capacity to evacuate 6 to 15 people. HELH, a heavy helicopter, a helicopter with, in normal circumstances, a radius of action of more than 200 nautical miles and a capacity to evacuate more than 15 people. RB, a rescue boat, a short-range coastal or river craft with a speed approaching 14 knots or better. RV, a rescue vessel, a vessel of seagoing qualities, long range and reasonable speed. PRU, a parachute rescue unit, MRU, a mountain rescue unit. The AMVER, the Automated Mutual Assistance Vessel Rescue System. And GreenPOS, the Greenland Ship Position Reporting System. You will remember, all contracting states shall arrange for the establishment and provision of search and rescue services within their territories, which will be provided on a 24-hour basis. Regardless of nationality, contracting states will undertake to provide assistance to aircraft in distress and survivors of aircraft accidents. Remember, contracting states shall delineate the search and rescue regions within which they will provide an SAR service. Such regions shall not overlap and, as far as possible, conform to the FIR boundaries of the state. Contracting states shall establish rescue coordination centres in each search and rescue region that they are responsible for. These may be supplemented with sub-centre rescue coordination centres, should the efficiency of the SAR service be improved by this. In remote regions, where the telecommunication infrastructure is not extensive, and the visual identification of aircraft in distress is difficult, contracting states are required to establish units of public or private services to act as alerting posts. Contracting states will coordinate their search and rescue organisations with those of neighbouring states so that practicable common SAR procedures can be established to facilitate effective response to an incident. States should, upon request, allow the search and rescue units of a neighbouring state to cross national borders to search for or rescue people involved in an airplane crash. States should immediately acknowledge any such request and indicate any conditions it may wish to impose. Contracting states should authorise its rescue coordination centres to provide, when requested, every assistance to other rescue coordination centres. This may take the form of aircraft, vessels, personnel or equipment. Periodic liaison and cooperative training between contracting states' SAR services is also required to further improve efficiency. Contracting states shall ensure that all aircraft, vessels, services and facilities that are not immediately part of the SAR service are able to respond and support the SAR effort and offer assistance as necessary. States shall designate a search and rescue point of contact for the receipt of COSPAS SARSAT search and rescue satellite tracking distress data.
Having established an effective territorial search and rescue organisation, contracting states will need to be able to speedily gather information about an aircraft emergency and process it quickly to ensure that an effective and appropriate search and rescue response can be made. Effective means of transmitting information about potential aircraft incidents must exist within a country, so that rescue coordination centres, known as RCCs, can start appropriate response action as swiftly as possible. RCCs shall immediately evaluate any information they receive to determine the extent of any response. If the information is obtained from sources other than an air traffic service unit, then the RCC shall determine which emergency phase the situation corresponds to, and shall start to apply the applicable procedures. During the uncertainty phase, RCCs shall cooperate with the reporting air traffic service units and any other appropriate services and agencies, in order that incoming reports may be speedily evaluated. If the situation escalates to the alert phase, then the RCC shall immediately alert the search and rescue units and initiate the operational plans. When an aircraft is believed to be in a state of distress, the RCC, in the order given here, will initiate action by appropriate search and rescue units in accordance with the operational plans, ascertain the position of the aircraft, estimate the degree of uncertainty regarding its position, and determine the extent of the search area, notify the aircraft operator and keep him updated of developments, notify adjacent RCCs who may be able to offer assistance or are concerned with the incident, Notify the Air Traffic Service Unit of the situation if the information has been received from a non-aviation source. Request at an early stage vessels, coastal stations, or any other assets to maintain a listening watch for any distress transmissions from the aircraft or emergency locator beacons, and keep those services informed of the search and rescue requirements. Assist the aircraft in distress as far as possible. From the available information, plan the conduct of any search effort and communicate that plan to the search and rescue units. Notify the state of registry. Notify the appropriate accident investigation departments. When a pilot in command intercepts a distress signal, message or transmission, he shall record the position of the craft in distress, if possible, take a bearing on the transmission, inform the relevant RCC or Air Traffic Service Unit of the distress transmission, at his discretion, whilst awaiting instructions, proceed to the position of the emergency call. When a pilot in command observes that another aircraft or surface vessel is in distress, he shall, unless he is unable, or given the circumstances it is unreasonable, unsafe, or unnecessary to do so, keep the aircraft in distress in sight until his presence is no longer needed. Take such action as is necessary to determine the position of the aircraft in distress. Report to the RCC or Air Traffic Service Unit as much of the following as he can: the type of aircraft in distress, its identification and condition, its position expressed in geographical coordinates, radio navigation or fix or distance and bearing from a known landmark, the time of the observation, the number of observed survivors, the number of observed life rafts and occupants, the apparent physical condition of any survivors. Act as instructed by the RCC or Air Traffic Service Unit. If the first aircraft on the scene of an aeroplane crash is not part of the search and rescue effort, then he shall resume responsibility of on-scene commander of all subsequently arriving aircraft until a dedicated search and rescue aircraft arrives. Should he not be able to communicate with the RCC or ATSU, then he will pass over this responsibility to the first aircraft to arrive that is able to do so. It may be necessary for an on-scene commander to communicate with ground vessels and direct them to the scene of an aircraft in distress. Aircraft should do this by transmitting by any means at their disposal. Maritime frequencies can be used, but if no direct means of communications can be established, visual signals may be used. The following procedures, performed in sequence by an aircraft, mean that the aircraft wishes to direct a surface craft towards an aircraft or a surface craft in distress. Circling the surface craft at least once, then crossing the projected path of the surface craft close ahead and at low altitude, whilst rocking its wings, or opening and closing its throttles, or changing its propeller pitch. Then heading in the direction in which the surface craft is to be directed. To signal that the assistance of the surface craft is no longer required, the following procedure should be performed. Cross the wake of a vessel close astern at a low altitude, whilst rocking your wings, or opening and closing the throttles, or changing the propeller pitch. Communications with survivors on the ground is treated in the same way. The on-scene commander must try all means to achieve direct communications. But if this is impossible, then the use of ground-to-air and air-to-ground signals are employed. The internationally agreed search and rescue signals which follow are only used for the specific meanings assigned to them. The instructions they convey should be acted upon when observed. They are as follows. Firstly, ground-to-air signals from survivors to aircraft. We or I require assistance. we or I require medical assistance, no or negative, yes or affirmative, proceed in this direction. And ground-to-air signals from search teams to aircraft. The operation is completed. We have found all personnel. We have found only some survivors. We are not able to continue, returning to base. Have divided into 2 groups, each proceeding in the direction indicated. Information received that the aircraft is in this direction. And nothing found, will continue the search. Rocking your wings or switching on and off your landing or navigation lights indicates that ground signals have been understood. Packaged up supplies can be dropped to survivors, and the content of such packages can be conveyed by the attachment of coloured streamers. ICAO document 7333 specifies the following. Red signifies medical and first aid supplies. Blue signifies food and water. Yellow signifies blankets and protective clothing. Perhaps the most important role that a non-specialist aircraft may play in the initial stages of an unfolding search and rescue operation is that of relaying communications. Even though a non-specialist aircraft might be equipped only with a VHF radio, it can still relay messages to regional control centres and air traffic service units. The table shown here is a list of the RTF frequencies allocated to emergency and SAR communications. Dedicated SAR aircraft will carry sophisticated communication systems: VLF, MF, HF, VHF, UHF and SATCOM. However, a civil aircraft carrying perhaps HF and VHF is still a useful communications platform and can relay messages via the RCC or Air Traffic Service Unit. The aim of aviation security shall be to safeguard international aviation operations against acts of unlawful interference. The safety of passengers, crew, ground personnel and the general public shall be the primary objective of each contracting state. Each contracting state therefore has a responsibility to establish security policy, plans and procedures, which together standardise the application of protective security measures across the globe, and is a system that allows rapid expansion to meet any increased threat. Each state shall, whenever possible, arrange for the security measures and procedures applied at its airports to cause minimum interference with, or delays to, the activities of international aviation. Each contracting state shall establish a national civil aviation security programme, ensure that the objective of their security programme is to safeguard international aviation operations against acts of unlawful interference through policies, plans and procedures that take account of the safety, regularity and efficiency of flights. Designate an appropriate authority within its administration to be responsible for the development, implementation and maintenance of the National Civil Aviation Security Programme. Specify to the ICAO the responsible national security authority. Keep under constant review the level of threat within its territory, taking into account the international situation, and adjust relevant elements of its National Civil Aviation Security Programme accordingly. Require the appropriate authority to establish means of coordinating activities between departments, agencies and other state organisations concerned with or responsible for aspects of the National Civil Aviation Security Policy, require the appropriate authority to define and allocate the tasks for implementation of the National Civil Aviation Security Programme between the agencies of the state, airport administrations, operators, and others concerned with security operations. With regard to airport security, contracting states should ensure that the establishment of an airport security programme is adequate for the needs of each airport serving international air traffic, make available to its airport administrators, operating airlines, and any others needing to know a written version of the appropriate elements of its National Civil Aviation Security Programme, arrange for an authority at each airport serving international civil aviation to be responsible for coordinating the implementation of security measures, arrange for the establishment of airport security committees to advise on the development and coordination of security measures and procedures at each airport serving international civil aviation. With regard to incident investigation and contingency planning, contracting states should ensure that arrangements are made for the investigation of suspected sabotage devices or other potential hazards at international airports and for their disposal, ensure that duly authorised and suitably trained officers are available for deployment at international airports to assist in dealing with suspected or actual cases of unlawful interference with international civil aviation, ensure that professional supporting services are available to the security services at each international airport, ensure that contingency plans are developed and resources made available to safeguard international airports and ground facilities against unlawful interference. Training of security staff is of paramount importance, and contracting states must ensure that appropriate measures are in place to make this training effective. Contracting states should require the appropriate authority to ensure the development and implementation of training programs, to ensure the effectiveness of the security structure, ensure that persons engaged to implement security controls are subject to pre-employment checks, are properly trained, and are capable of fulfilling their duties. With regard to the responsibilities of the operator, each contracting state should require the operator to implement a security program appropriate to meet the requirements of the National Civil Aviation Security Program of the state, promote research and development of new security equipment, policies and procedures which will better satisfy civil aviation security objectives. In order to effectively combat international terrorism, contracting states are to act within a coordinated framework and to common standards. Each state is therefore required to cooperate with other states in order to adapt their respective national civil aviation security programs as necessary, make available to other states, on request, a written version of their civil aviation security program, include in its bilateral agreements on air transport a clause relating to aviation security, ensure that requests from other states for special security measures in respect of a specific flight or specified flights by operators of other states are, as far as practicable, met, cooperate with other states in the field of research and development of new security equipment, which will better satisfy the civil aviation security need, cooperate with each other in the development and exchange of information concerning training programs. Contracting states shall establish measures that prevent weapons, explosives, or any dangerous devices from being introduced by any means on board an aircraft engaged in international civil aviation. Each contracting state shall ensure that pre-flight checks of originating aircraft assigned to international flights include measures to discover suspicious objects or anomalies that could conceal weapons, explosives, or any other dangerous devices, establish procedures which include notification to the operator for inspecting aircraft when either a well-founded suspicion exists that the aircraft may be the object of an act of unlawful interference, or for concealed weapons, explosives, or other dangerous devices. Establish measures to safeguard aircraft when a well-founded suspicion exists that the aircraft may be attacked while on the ground, and to provide as much prior notification as possible of the arrival of such aircraft to the airport authorities. Arrange for surveys to identify security needs. Arrange for security inspections of the implementation of security controls. And arrange tests of security controls to assess their effectiveness. Contracting states must ensure that the carriage of weapons on board aircraft by authorised personnel acting in accordance with their duties is authorised in accordance with the state's national laws. The pilot in command must be notified as to the number of armed persons and their seat location. The carriage of weapons on board an aircraft is allowed only when they are stowed in a place inaccessible to the passengers. States are to ensure that adequate security measures are in place to control the transfer of passengers and their cabin baggage. Passengers who have been security screened are not permitted to come into contact with those who have not been security screened. States are to establish measures to ensure that operators do not transport the baggage of passengers who are not on board the aircraft. States are required to establish procedures and identification systems to prevent unauthorised access by persons or vehicles to the airside of an aerodrome. Deportees and people in custody are to be dealt with in accordance with procedures laid down by contracting states that ensure that appropriate security measures are in place. Contracting states shall take measures to ensure the safety of passengers and crew of an aircraft which is subject to an act of unlawful interference until their journey can be safely continued. Each contracting state responsible for providing air traffic services for an aircraft subject to unlawful interference shall collect all pertinent information on the flight and transmit that information to all other parties likely to become involved in the situation, including the presumed destination of the aircraft. Each contracting state shall provide such assistance as is necessary to an aircraft subjected to unlawful seizure. This shall include the provision of navigation aids, air traffic services, and permission to land. Steps should be taken by contracting states to ensure that once landed, an aircraft subject to unlawful seizure shall be detained on the ground, unless to do so would risk an overriding responsibility to protect life. The content of other ICAO annexes and documents relate directly to security, and you should be familiar with them. The first is ICAO Annex 2, Rules of the Air, which states the following. An aircraft subject to unlawful interference shall endeavour to notify the appropriate Air Traffic Service Unit of this fact, in order to enable the Air Traffic Service Unit to minimise conflict with other aircraft. Pilots in command should endeavour to continue with the notified flight plan and fly the assigned tracks headings and airspeeds. Should the aircraft be forced from its assigned flight plan and be unable to communicate with an Air Traffic Service Unit, it should attempt to broadcast a warning on emergency frequencies unless circumstances dictate otherwise, and proceed in accordance with any special procedures for in-flight contingencies where such procedures have been established. If no special procedures exist, fly at 1,000 feet above the normal cruising level, wherever 2,000 feet vertical separation is specified, or 500 feet above the cruising level, wherever 1,000 feet vertical separation is specified. Secondly, the ICAO Annex 6 Part 1 Operation of Aircraft document refers to some aspects of aircraft operational security. Annex 6 states that, in all aircraft that have a crew compartment door, it shall be capable of being locked from within. An operator shall ensure that there is on board a checklist of the procedures to be followed when searching for a bomb, in case of suspected sabotage. It shall detail actions to be taken in the event of finding a device, and information on the least risk bomb location specific to the aeroplane. An operator shall establish and maintain a training program which enables crew members to act in the most appropriate manner to minimize the consequences of acts of unlawful interference. Following an act of unlawful interference, the pilot in command shall submit without delay a report of such an act to the designated local authority. Specialized means of attenuating and directing the blast of a bomb should be provided for use at the least risk bomb location. When an operator accepts the carriage of weapons removed from passengers, the aeroplane should have provision for stowing such weapons in a place that is inaccessible to any persons in flight. The ICAO Annex 9 refers to facilitation and seeks to relate the needs for strict security and facilitation. Contracting states must ensure that facilities exist that keep security-cleared passengers and baggage separated from non-cleared passengers and baggage. States must also provide a secure area for transit passengers to remain, and not require them to submit to full immigration procedures whilst temporarily there. The ICAO document 4444 lays down emergency procedures for air traffic control units, and, whilst non-specific to allow for full flexibility, provides guidelines to individuals who have to deal with such incidents. These are as follows. Should an air traffic control unit believe an aircraft to be in a state of emergency, then it should be given priority over other aircraft. Air traffic services personnel should be prepared to recognise any indication of the occurrence of unlawful interference to aircraft, and attempt to verify any suspicion by using SSR codes that may indicate hijack or emergency situations. Whenever unlawful interference with an aircraft is known or suspected, or a bomb threat warning has been received, air traffic service units will promptly attend to all requests by the aircraft and try to anticipate its future needs. This will particularly be the case with the need for impromptu navigational assistance. Air traffic service units shall take such action as is necessary to safely expedite all phases of the flight, transmitting any information pertinent to the safety of the flight, monitor it all the time, and keep all air traffic service units that may become affected by the flight informed of the situation. Annex 14 requires each airport to allocate at least one specified taxiing route to a remote parking position that will keep suspect aircraft at least 100 metres from other aircraft, buildings, fuel installations, or public areas. That concludes the lessons on security. The ICAO standards and recommended practices for the investigation of aircraft accidents and incidents are contained in Annex 13 of the Convention. Unless otherwise stated, they will apply universally, following all accidents and incidents wherever they occur. Some definitions need to be appreciated when talking about aircraft accidents and incidents, and we shall look at the main ones now. An accident is an occurrence associated with the operation of aircraft, which takes place between the time any person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight until such time as all such persons have disembarked, in which a person is fatally or seriously injured as a result of being in an aircraft or being in direct contact with any part of an aircraft, including bits that have fallen off, or being exposed to jet blast, or the aircraft sustains damage or structural failure which adversely affects the structural strength, performance or flight characteristics of the aircraft, and would normally require major repair or replacement of the affected component, except for engine failure confined to the entire power unit, or damage limited to propellers, wingtips, antennas, tyres, brakes, fairings, and small punctures to the aircraft skin, or the aircraft is missing or completely inaccessible. An aircraft is defined as any machine that can derive support in the atmosphere from the reactions of the air, other than the reactions of the air against the Earth's surface. A flight recorder is any recording device installed in an aircraft for the purpose of complementing accident or incident investigations. An incident is an occurrence other than an accident associated with the operation of aircraft which does or could affect the safety of the operation. Investigation is the process conducted for the purpose of accident prevention, which includes the gathering and analysis of information, the drawing of conclusions, including the determination of causes, and, when appropriate, the making of safety recommendations. The maximum certified takeoff mass is known as maximum mass. Any person, organisation, or enterprise engaged in or offering to engage in aircraft operation will be known as the operator. Any event involving circumstances indicating that an accident nearly occurred shall be called a serious incident. A serious injury is an injury sustained by a person in an accident which requires more than 48-hour hospitalisation within 7 days from the date of injury, results in fracture of any bone, involves lacerations causing severe hemorrhaging or nerve or muscle damage, involves injury to internal organs, involves second or third degree burns affecting more than 5% of the body surface, involves verified exposure to infectious substances or injurious radiation. The state of manufacture is defined as the state having jurisdiction over the organisation responsible for the final assembly of the aircraft. The state of occurrence is the state in the territory of which an accident or incident occurs. The state of the operator is the state in which the operator's principal place of business is located, or, if there is no such place of business, the operator's permanent residence. The state of registry is defined as the state on whose register the aircraft is entered. And the state of design is the state having jurisdiction over the organisation responsible for the type design. The object of an investigation into an accident or incident is to prevent it from happening again. It is not the purpose of this activity to apportion blame. Contracting states shall take all reasonable measures to protect any evidence, aircraft and their contents, at the scene of an aircraft accident or incident, for any period necessary for the period of investigation. States shall impose safe custody of an accident site to achieve protection against further damage, denial of access to unauthorized persons, prevention of pilfering, and prevention of the deterioration of evidence. The protection of flight data recording, FDR evidence, requires that the recovery and handling of the recorder is performed by qualified personnel. A state of registry may request that the site of an accident remain undisturbed until its investigators arrive. The state in which the accident occurred should facilitate this if at all possible. Similar requests from states of manufacture or operators should be treated in the same way. Rescue efforts or activity to eliminate future danger should not be hindered, nor should the course of accident investigation be delayed by such requests. The state of occurrence will release custody of the aircraft, its contents or parts, when no longer required for the investigation, to any authorized person. Should an accident occur, the state in which it happens has the duty to inform the state of registry, the state of the operator, the state of design, the state of manufacture, ICAO if the aircraft involved has a maximum takeoff mass greater than 2,250 kilograms. When notified of an accident, the State of Registry will, as soon as possible, provide the state of occurrence with any relevant information regarding the aircraft and flight crew concerned. It will also nominate any accredited representatives to the investigative team. If the accident is not known to the state of occurrence, perhaps the crash site is in a remote area, the State of Registry will inform the relevant parties. The state of occurrence, the state of the operator, the state of design, the state of manufacture, the ICAO if the aircraft involved has a maximum takeoff mass greater than 2,250 kilograms. The manufacturers or designers will assist any investigation as much as possible, providing all available information regarding the aircraft. The state of occurrence is to instigate any accident investigation. Should the accident occur in a non-contracting state, then the State of Registry will instigate the investigation. So, the State of Registry, State of Operator, State of Design, and State of Manufacture are all entitled to attend the accident investigation. Similarly, the parent state of any casualties is entitled to be represented, along with any state providing information, facilities, or experts. When the accident concerns an aircraft whose maximum takeoff mass is greater than 2,250 kilograms, then the state conducting the investigation is to copy the report to the State of Registry, the State of the Operator, the State of Design, the State of Manufacture, any state that provided information facilities or experts, ICAO, any state whose citizens suffered fatalities or injuries. International dissemination of the report into an accident to an aircraft with a maximum takeoff mass greater than 5,700 kilograms may be made by ICAO. To give you an idea of some of those incidents that might be considered to be examples of a serious incident, we have produced a short list shown here. Near collisions, requiring the initiation of an avoidance maneuver, controlled flight into terrain only marginally avoided, aborted takeoffs on a closed or engaged runway, takeoff from a closed or engaged runway with marginal separation from obstacles, landings or attempted landings on a closed or engaged runway, fires or smoke inside the aircraft, gross failures to achieve predicted performance during takeoff or climb, events requiring the emergency use of oxygen, aircraft structural failures or engine disintegrations, multiple system malfunctions affecting aircraft operation, flight crew incapacitation in flight, a fuel emergency, takeoff or landing incidents, undershooting or overrunning, operations outside the flight envelope or system failures that cause difficulties controlling the aircraft, failures in more than one system in a redundancy system, mandatory for flight guidance and navigation. That concludes the lessons on aircraft accident and incident investigation.